Now we're going to keep our focus on the impact on industry in Victoria because this is a critical issue today more than any other day. So joining us live now is Dr. Geoffrey Annison, Acting CEO of the Australian Food and Grocery Council. Dr. Annison, thank you for your time. There are some really critical questions about the food chain supply in Victoria. What are your concerns?
Well, we are a little bit concerned about the food supply, but this is not really a shortage of food or indeed non-food grocery products at the top end of the supply chain. We are concerned about some of the restrictions that are being brought in and the ability to move those products down the supply chain and into supermarkets.
My read of the restrictions is you're being told to limit the number of people in distribution centres but keep up the same capacity. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, certainly that seems to be the advice from the government at the moment, but what might not be appreciated is that if we have any slowdown of products moving out of the warehouses, then obviously we have to also slow down product upstream in the manufacturing sectors. So we appreciate strongly the government's desire to suppress the transmission of this virus, but it is important that we get the food products that everyday Australians and particularly Victorians at this time need to get from the supermarkets.
If we work on the assumption that most viewers here wouldn't have ever worked in a food distribution centre, can you tell us just at a very practical level what the restrictions are and why that's going to be very hard to adapt to?
Well, the distribution centres are places to which food and grocery products move from the manufacturers before they get distributed out to each of the individual supermarkets. They're used to control the supply into those supermarkets depending on the demand which the supermarkets themselves individually are experiencing. They comprise of a workforce that is designed or which is required to pick products off the storage shelves within the distribution centres and put them onto trucks. If there is a limit in the number of workers who can do that, then clearly there is a limit in the volume of products that can be moved out of the distribution centres and indeed moved into the distribution centres for replenishment to make sure that the supermarket shelves remain stocked.
So are you asking the government for greater clarification on an issue, or are you asking them to change what they're asking of you?
What we're asking them to do is recognise that already distribution centres and other parts of the supply chain, including up to the manufacturing areas or companies, they already work, they're already experiencing an uplift in demand because of consumer concerns around the country. Not only that, they normally work very efficiently and they don't, as a matter of course, have a surplus of workers in any particular production facility. So if you remove a third at any particular time, there is a danger that production can be reduced, but also that the movement of goods down the supply chain also becomes affected. I mean, we need workers to move products. I think each of the businesses along the supply chain have obviously been working very carefully over the last few months to ensure that they have practices, they have COVID-safe plans to ensure that transmission of the viruses between workers when they are at work and on site is that the risk of that is reduced as much as possible. In the food manufacturing sector, for example, we routinely use very high levels of hygienic practice in order to reduce the risk of transmission. So just to put a blanket requirement across parts of the supply chain that they reduce their workforce by a third can be problematic and may be unnecessary in some cases in order to ensure that transmission is suppressed. Having said that, we do thoroughly support the government's efforts in this area to reduce transmission across the community. But we just think we can nuance some of this response and still remain an effective suppression of the virus in the food production and supply chain.
So when you say nuance this response, are you asking the government to increase the number of people that you're allowed to have in distribution centres?
What we'd like them to do is to recognise that the distribution centres, as well as other parts of the supply chain, have sophisticated COVID-safe plans already, which go to staff management and how they interact on site. So, for example, we have introduced systems where there are small teams in distribution centres and along the supply chain, and those teams do not interact in any way leading to the breakdown of social distancing. So these types of measures, having small teams operating independently and not crossing paths within production centres and other places along the supply chain, is a way that transmission of the virus can be reduced and suppressed while the workers are at work.
Certainly no easy answers, but really interesting to get that insight from industry. Thank you, Doctor, for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.